22?
Yeah. Okay, Habal, okay. The husband inherits his wife. And he's before everybody else. And when does that moment happen that the husband is full inheritance? After she leaves her father's house and comes into his. So, we spoke earlier, we said, really, if someone comes betrothed first, and then they stay betrothed for about a year, and then they stay betrothed for, let's say, a year or so, and then they finally take their wife into the chuppah, they get married to them. So from that moment that she leaves her house, that's when he gets it. And even though they didn't go to the chuppah, but she left her father's house, because, okay, for example, she's engaged and her father gave it to her husband or to the shluchim, the messengers of the husband, or they gave the shluchim of the father to the husband, or to the shluchim of the husband. Shluchim are their messengers, and she dies before she gets married, even though the ketubah is still in her father's house. The husband inherits her. And similarly, if the father goes with the husband and he goes with her in private, and then she dies, then he gets it. However, if she still has to leave her father's house, or the messengers left and they have to meet with the messengers of the husband, even if he went inside in private to stay in their house, since the father and the shluchim are with her still, and he didn't go with her in private for the sake of marriage, if she dies, the father gets it, even though the ketubah is in the house of her husband. Okay, if she is older, or she's a orphan or a widow, and she goes from her father's house to the house of her father, and she dies on the way, the husband does not get it. If someone marries, so I guess, there's a very specific time where the husband inherits the wife. Note that it's possible that, if someone's not halachically married, and, there's a fight over the assets of the wife, if he's very wealthy or whatever it is, nowadays it could actually kind of be a mess. So I'm just trying to imagine in my mind. Okay, if someone because if he's married to her, but not halachically married, it could be a mess. Okay, there could indeed be a fight, and these laws would likely be relevant. If someone gets married to a lady who is forbidden for him to marry. All right, now here's the big debate. So let's say a Kohen cannot, or a regular Jew cannot get married to a bastard, right? A Kohen cannot get married to a divorced lady. Now let's say he does get married. Is he halachically married? Yes, but he's not allowed to be married to her. So
how can that be?
Well, so in other words, the financial transaction works, according to the Rambam. The financial transaction works. But, so now if she dies, so a Kohen gets married to a divorced lady. Now, if you go to a rabbi, actually this is a very interesting thing. If you go to a rabbi and say, can I get married to this lady? They will look into if you're permitted to get married. Now, what would be forbidden to get married? If one of them is not Jewish, then they can't, that's not a marriage, like according to Jewish law. If one of them is a bastard, then they can't get married according to Jewish law. More commonly, if the husband is a Kohen and she is one of a list of things which aren't major things, but he just can't get married to her. So an Orthodox rabbi won't marry you off. Unfortunately, conservative and reform would. But anyways, let's say they got married on their own, because again, all you have to do to get married is you need two witnesses and give her something of value in front of the two witnesses, right? So they got married on their own. Similarly, if someone got married to a little girl, even though she's a little girl who's less than 12 years old, her marriage is not a full marriage. She's married, and then she can kind of back out when she gets older. So even though it's not a full marriage, if she dies, he inherits her. However, let's say a guy marries a regular person, marries a deaf mute. If she dies, he doesn't inherit her. And the deaf mute that marries a regular lady, if she dies, he does inherit her, because in the olden days, now actually the halachas kind of changed. It's a very interesting subject. It used to be a deaf mute was totally out of this world. Pre-Helen Keller. for sure, right? Nowadays, a deaf mute can use technology and everything like that, can actually drive cars and things like that. So nowadays, these laws are different. But the idea of a deaf mute is not that he's deaf and mute. It's that he's not able to count, to have relationships with people because he's. So if a guy gets married to a deaf mute lady, he doesn't inherit her because we don't even know if she wants to be married, right? But we know she might be happy with whatever she has, but we can't ask her. On the other hand, if a deaf mute guy gets married to a regular lady, he doesn't inherit her because we can't ask her. We know she wants to get married. A child gets married, Ladas Avia. Her father marries her off. So the father betroths her. And then the next stage of marriage is not under his. He didn't ask him. Whether it's in front of him, whether it's not in front of the father, can protest, as we explained before. And even if he's quiet, if the husband dies, if she dies, the husband inherits her. If the husband does not inherit her, because unless we know for sure the father agreed to the marriage. So the father didn't protest to the nisuin. He didn't protest. He was quiet. Now the daughter dies. The husband does not inherit her. The father inherits her because he did not. We don't know for sure that the father agreed to the marriage, and a young girl's marriage is 100% contingent on her father.
If she dies while she's a minor.
Yeah, so she's a minor, and now, okay, the Gaonim. Okay. The Gaonim, or the pre-Rambam rabbis, they said, a lady who gets sick, now she has a lot of assets. She tells her husband, divorce me, I won't take a ketubah. I don't want you to inherit me. We don't listen to her. Even if she says, I hate him and I don't want him to stand with me, we don't listen to her. And we don't consider her a moiredes, a rebellious wife. And this is a good law, the Rambam says. So now typically if she says, I hate him and everything like that, and she rebels against him, then she could get divorced. And but here she's on her death, she's sick, she's very sick, and she's trying to manipulate him. So the rabbis didn't want that to happen.
But what ulterior motive would she have if she's sick?
She just doesn't want him to inherit her. Now he has rights over her assets. She just literally doesn't want him to, she knows she's going to die, she doesn't want him to inherit her. All right, anything that a husband, now again, this would be done differently nowadays because if she really wanted it, it would be done in civil. It will be done in civil court now, and she would be able to do that, right?
The assumption is they're betrothed.
They're married, and she says, "Boy, I'm going to die. I would like a divorce. Don't give me my ketubah. I don't need any rights."
Oh yeah, divorce is what you want.
Yeah, don't give me my ketubah. I don't want any rights. And the only reason why she's doing it, because if she's dying, she could die married. The only reason why she's doing it is she doesn't want him to inherit. So the Gaonim said, we don't listen to her. We don't let her get divorced. All right. Anything that a wife has, whether it is tzoyin barzel, whether it's maloig, so whether, we said there are two types of property. One type of property, the husband takes responsibility for it. And so she has a field, it belongs to her, it's under her name. She inherited it. She still gets, the husband gets to enjoy the products of it as long as she's alive. Once she dies, the husband inherits it. Therefore, if she sells it after she's married, even though those things fell before she got engaged, the husband could take the fruit from the people who bought it as long as she's alive. But he can't take the field because he doesn't get anything from the field until she dies. If she dies during his lifetime, he could take the field from the people she sold it without money. And if the money that she bought it from them is still there, then he returns it, and he cannot say, hey, maybe she found this money. Okay, so we're going to stop here because I want to do Tanya. And because of the campaign, I got a lot of things to do for Hanukkah. And there's another kids program tonight. So for girls. And I just got a call from Trader Joe's that the latkes arrived. So I'll have latkes.
Sure.
And also I got to do a lot of things. Okay. So we're going to start from the beginning. Page 1, the Hakdama. I think it's important when, before learning the Tanya, Now, actually, we're going to start from this. See the title page? The title page. Now, you'll see in every Tanya, it goes through the title page because we learn the title page. And actually, there's a lot of traditions, a lot of interesting anecdotes, and in order to understand the Tanya, it's important to do this. So, the Tanya comprises what we call the Tanya comprises of 5 books. It comprises of 5 books, one at a time. So the Tanya Oh, you can't eat that now. Yeah. Okay.
So what page are you on now?
We are on page. Let me find that on your phone.
I have it on the title page.
Oh, okay. Let's see. No, a little bit before that. Let's go previous. I'll get there. Okay, right here. Okay, so it starts off Lakute Sefer Lakute Amarim. So this is the book, the first book. This is how the Alter Rebbe titles his book, and you'll see the Alter Rebbe has a theme. He says it's a gathering of sayings. So the Alter Rebbe actually in his book doesn't really want to take credit for the book. He says it's a gathering of sayings from his teachers. The Rebbe's most famous book is called Lakute Siches. Is also gathering of speeches. Show that to mom. Actually, mom was looking for that. So Lakute Amarim Chelik Rishon Hanikra Sefer Shel Beinanim. What is the first book called? It's called the book of Beinanim. A Beinani is somebody who is, as we'll study a lot about it. There's a kind of modern, more New Age translation of the Tanya that's out. So there he calls it the book of in-betweeners. And the Tanya is talking, there's really righteous people and wicked people, and then there's everyone in between who are trying their best. So that's what the Tanya is about. It's in between, and we're going to go for a long time trying to explain what that means. Malukah mi Pisfarim Seifrim. This is a gathering of books and from rabbis. So there's a list of rabbis that traditionally were the Alter Rebbe's teachers. The Maharal, he wasn't his teacher, but his philosophy is very prevalent in the Alter Rebbe's teachings. The Maharal, the Shalah HaKadosh, Rabbi Yeshayahu Horowitz, he lived in about in the 1600s, 1700s, the 1600s. The Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid of Mezrich, Kadosh Elyon. So the Alter Rebbe basically says this book is just sayings from my teachers. Miyuf Sir al Pasik. This whole book is founded on the verse Ki kadev elecha hadavar ma'id beficha v'vav chalasesei. It says in the Torah, God says, I am very close to you, in your mouth, in your heart, and in your action. So thought, speech, and action, you'll see it has a lot to do with this. So the Alter Rebbe is starting with kind of a premise in the Tanya that that to really feel God is close in our thought, speech, and action can be difficult. Right? A lot of times we can feel self-absorbed or forget about God. We're thinking about other things. So how is God close? So that's what the Tanya is going to explain. It's going to ultimately explain how God is everywhere and He's in everything, and everything in our life can be God-centric, and that's the goal of the Tanya. However, the Alter Rebbe continues on. So he says that's the verse. The whole Tanya is explaining that verse. How God is always close in our heart, in our thought, speech, and action. The verse says, "Beficha in your mouth, bilvavcha is your heart, la'asoisa in your action." So a lot of times we do things which are not godly. Where do we find God there? Levar heitiv echu karev ma'id. We're going to explain very well how God is close. B'derech arucha k'tzara, in the long, short way. B'ezras Hashem Yisbarich. So this is where the long, short way is most famously coined. It's a story in the Midrash. It says Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya, he was going to Jerusalem and he asked a child, how do you get there? And he said, do you want the long, short way or the short, long way? So the child, he said, well, I would like the short, long way. The shorter, which one's faster? The short, long way. So he took him and he brought him, he said, there, you just go straight this way. So he saw there were thorn bushes between him and the destination. He can't get to the thorn bushes, but the destination's right there. If you take a beeline, you can make a beeline right there, right? So he came back to actually the long, short way. Oh, the long, short way, well, he took him on the path. The path went around and everything. but he brought him there. Now, what is the significance of the long, short way, short, long way? So the Alter Rebbe was one of many students of the Maggid of Mezrich. The Maggid of Mezrich had many students. Now, most of the Hasidism in the world, till today, is the mechanism of Hasidism is, let's say you have a Rebbe, and we'll talk about Rebbes in chapter 2. You have a rabbi who you really realize is totally transcendent and out of this world. He's so holy and he's so pure. Maybe you experience him do a miracle, you know? So you say, wow, I dedicate my life to you. Whatever you tell me to do for God, that's what's going to bring me close to God. And he guides you. Now, the Alter Rebbe, why is that the short, long way? Because you might be doing everything you need to do, right? That Rebbe might give you the instructions of how to fulfill your mission in life. But you might be a coarse person. You might have other issues. And those issues block you from feeling God, you from relating to God. So in other words, you're following somebody else who you know is right. You know he's telling you to do the right thing, but there's blockages in you for you to experience, for it to transform yourself. That's called the short, long way. So you're doing the right thing tomorrow. He says, this is how your mission is to go to this city and bring a menorah to that person, right? You're doing the right thing, but you're not connecting to it on a personal level. That's the short, long way. The Alter Rebbe founded what's called Chabad, the Chabad movement. Chabad movement is the long, short way. The long, short way is that instead of going to the Rebbe, so the Rebbe might do a miracle or something. You might have some transcendent experience which makes you want to follow him. But after you want to follow him, what does he tell you? He says, okay, now go study this for a long time. And when the Alter Rebbe was of the opinion that if you could give over the ideas in a intellectual way, people will be able to connect to it on their own level. So that's why it's the longer, shorter. The short, long way is you're doing the right thing, you're following the right thing, you're kind of white knuckling. You have blockages in yourself. You don't necessarily connect to it in your fully in your life. That's the short, long way. And that's what Hasidim always consider the other students of the Baal Shem Tov. In other words, like if you meet a rabbi who only sees good and only sees God in the world, you'll be in awe. And then he'll tell you, you'll want to blindly follow him because you'll say, this is awesome. He has it right. He can give me a life of meaning. But the Alter Rebbe said, no, I want you to discover the life of meaning on your own. In other words, I want you to have a piece of what I have. So that's why that's considered the long, short way. And that's why the Tanya is quite long. And so now he's going to explain in great length how Derech Harucha K'tzara, how God is so present in our lives that every decision and every moment in our life, potentially we can use that to connect to God, even when we're doing anything, even when we're fixing our car.
But if we even take the parable literally, the short, long way never arrives at its destination because he gets to the thorns. Correct. And he's so close, but he can never get there.
So you're in the right direction. You can see, what is the city? The city is Ir Elokeinu. This is how the Hasidim would talk about this. The city is the city of God. So the Alter Rebbe's Hasidus was unique, where he said, I don't want you, and actually, interestingly, when the day the Rebbe became Rebbe, he said, I'm not giving out free gifts here. He said, people are going to have to work, but I'll help you. And that's what the Rebbe said. So correct. You see, you're in the right direction. You know the right thing. You know what the goal is. You know what life is about, but it's not internalized with you. In other words, you're totally going to need to go and keep going to the Rebbe and saying, what do I do now? What do I do now? What do I do now? If you want your life to have it on a regular basis, because the Alter Rebbe, what he's going to do here is make us understand what we're doing and understand how we're getting close to God and understand how this is our mission in life. So,
does the Alter Rebbe actually use the acronym Chabad in the Tanya?
Yes. Yeah, quite a bit. Yeah, so actually the other Hasidim, the other Hasidim are known as Chagas Hasidim. Chagas stands for Chesed Gevura Tiferes. What is Chagas? It's emotional. when you go to the presence of a Rebbe, now I don't know if there are Rebbes nowadays who are alive physically, but in the old generation, when you go to a Rebbe, it was so uplifting because this was a godly person, and it was uplifting emotionally. So you would be, let's say, you'd be like, I don't know, I'm not so convinced about Judaism. You go to the Rebbe, and now you're convinced automatically. But it was an emotional. Now, what the Alter Rebbe was concerned is if it's an emotional moment of inspiration, it's not going to last because emotions don't last. Intellect lasts because intellect kind of changes the hardwiring of your system. But so there were many Hasidim that they would kind of say the Rebbe does the main job. He tells me what to do, and and I follow. And every so often I go to the Rebbe and get a recharge, refocus my life. Now Chabad Hasidim also refocus their life, but always they would leave with a pamphlet. This is the new Hasidus that the Rebbe taught, and that's what they would study again and again and again and again. There's a phenomenal story which I've said before, but there was once a famous businessman, and he was a Chassid of the Fifth Lodge Rebbe. He was very wealthy, so he famous stories of him giving all his money to the Rebbe. So, anyways, he's sitting with a bunch of businessmen, and they're all talking about their Rebbes. And we underestimate the Holocaust Rebbes were something where they could melt just anybody. They could melt even the Alter Rebbe. There's a story where they couldn't sit. He was wearing tefillin when they were interrogating him, and they couldn't sit down. They couldn't move. And one of them asked, because it was the Alter Rebbe wearing tefillin, was such a godly emanation. It was like they were all in fear. So they were all sitting there, and they're all talking about their Rebbes, and they're all saying different miracles the Rebbe did. Anyways, they get to the Chabad Chassid, and they say, "What's the miracle?" He said, "The Rebbe told me to invest in so and so, and I invested, and I lost all my money." So they said, "What's the miracle?" He said, "The miracle is that I'm still a Chassid." Now, in that story, what he was actually saying was, my service in life and my relationship to the Rebbe isn't about miracles. It's about doing the right thing. It's about following. If I lose all my money and the Rebbe told me to make the business decision, then I'm willing to do that. That's my job in the world. There's something deeper than miracles. Interestingly, Chabad was not into miracles until the American generation, and there's actually letters back and forth between the Rebbe and the previous Rebbe about miracles. The previous Rebbe said, Chabad tradition is not to talk so much about miracles of the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said, in this generation, in America, the people are so far assimilated, sometimes the only way to latch them on is you tell them a story. You tell them a story, hear a story, and it gets interest. But the main thing is not miracles. The main thing is the study. So that's what we're going to do.
But it seems a central focus is on an intellectual exercise.
Correct, yes. So the Rebbe basically said, it's true that Hasidim, as the previous Rebbe writes, that his grandmother said, in the times of the Alter Rebbe, the miracles were flying under the table, but nobody spoke about them because it was totally intellectual. It was totally about studying and totally about transforming yourself. The Rebbe just said in America, when you're starting with somebody and they don't seem to have any faith, so the only way they get faith sometimes is they have some sort of transcendent experience. They have some experience and then they're latched on. But the Rebbe also writes, when you just relying on miracles, it won't transform you. And it is astonishing, there's all these videos of testimony of different miracles with the Rebbe, and there are some people who changed their life totally. And there's some people who had incredible miracles, but they didn't change at all. Because when you don't anchor a transcendent experience, and you don't make a choice to make you don't make a choice to change something in your life, it doesn't happen on its own, and it's like you're feeling amazing today, and tomorrow it's gone.
That book that was published recently, it has a chapter about you.
Yeah.
That's a book of miracles, right?
That is a book of miracles. Well, so that book I actually found is very interesting because after the Rebbe died, a lot of Hasidim felt like, we don't have a leader anymore. Now, the truth is if you read the Rebbe's talks, almost once a month, the Rebbe spoke about how the previous Rebbe is still alive, he's still running the show. So he definitely believed that idea of a Rebbe, and people would say, can you bless me with this?" And the Rebbe would say, "Write it down, and I'll take it and ask my father-in-law, to bless you in the grave." So, but the Rebbe's the Rebbe, and a Rebbe can see, he can see spirituality better than we can. At Gimel Tammuz, when the Rebbe passed away, a lot of Hasidim were like, "Well, let's continue." In fact, many said it wouldn't. And there were some who said, "No, it will." There's a book called The Secret of Chabad, and it gives a very powerful description of the Rebbe passing away. And the head rabbi of California, Rabbi Shlomo Kunyan, at the grave, screaming, "Rebbe, we know you hear us. We're going to continue this. We're going to bring Mashiach. We're going to follow what you did. We're only going to grow." And it's very powerful because in that time, there were a lot of Hasidim who weren't, they never experienced that. So that book is a pretty powerful book because it's just regular people who went to the Ohel, sent a letter to the Rebbe, and the title of that book is actually the Rebbe's handwriting from 1950, where now the Rebbe didn't want to become Rebbe for a year. So people would come to him and they say, "I need a blessing." So he would say, "Go to my father-in-law." "You can't go to your father-in-law." "Go. How will he answer me?" And the Rebbe wrote, "The Rebbe vet gefinnen aveg," which means the Rebbe will find a way. He'll find a way to answer. And that's where that term comes from. And, anytime not any time, but almost every time a miracle came through the Rebbe, someone had children or whatever it is, almost every time the Rebbe gave absolute credit to his father-in-law. Said absolute credit. "Yeah, I just prayed for you at my father-in-law's grave," which was ominous that the Rebbe. Some say the Rebbe knew that it would be a time he passed away, and his guidance would be, based on the guidance that he gave to his father. I mean, I'm not going to go into it now, but that's an interesting subject. Well, it's actually related to the Hakdama. So I just want to read a little bit of the Hakdama to Malakit, the preface. So afterwards in the Tanya, it has all the approbations from different rabbis of that time. A lot of interesting stories behind approbations, but I'm not going to go into it. You can go into it on your own. I just wanted to go in, and I'm going to sum up the preface. So we'll finish it today, and then we will start the Tanya in chapter 1 tomorrow. And hopefully I'll intro. You need something? Okay. So he says, we know that
Is this the letter?
okay, so there's a few letters, and then afterwards there is the intro of the Alter Rebbe. I'll just go through it on the fast. So the Alter Rebbe basically says, we know that when you meet a great rabbi, it's not the same as reading his books. Because when you hear it from him, you hear it the way it is. When you read things, you absorb them the way you want, and sometimes you misunderstand things, right? So in other words, when you hear it from the Rebbe, or you hear it from the teacher, you can say, "Am I getting it right?" No, you're not getting it right. When you read it, if you're having a rough day, you might not be able to concentrate, or you might be confused, or whatever it is. So, and sometimes you can't see the light in what you're reading. You can't see how it's going to help you. And then, most books on how to love and fear God are built on intellectual terms, and not everyone's equal. Some people are smarter, some people are not smarter. Some people get inspired, some people don't get inspired. As the Jewish law, when you see 600,000 Jews together, you make a special blessing. And what is the special blessing? The special blessing is kind of like we recognize that 600,000 people and no two people think alike. Everyone has a different perspective. And, okay. So, even though you have books, and obviously a Torah book is based on universal concepts of the Torah, which are fully accepted, nevertheless, still everybody has their own and all those things are one with God, and every Jew is connected to it. Nevertheless, everyone still has their different meaningful things in the Torah. A lot of times when you teach a class or you ask people what was meaningful, everyone has a different answer. Everyone has a different answer what was meaningful to them, what they understood, what they didn't understand, what they connected to. And this is generally by all Jews. And even though the Torah is given over for everybody to go and understand, not everyone realizes their exact part of Torah that they're supposed to understand. And even when it comes to revealed simple things, there's debates in Torah, there's not clarity in Torah, right? So this is Alter Rebbe is basically saying a lot of books in Torah, even though the meaning is universal and they're totally true, it's difficult for everyone to absorb them equally. And even though the Talmud says that every opinion in the Talmud is true. So, and how much more so when we're not talking about great rabbis? Even the great rabbis dispute. We're talking about our simple selves. We can easily make mistakes or not understand things or skip over things. And especially when it comes to spiritual things like having love and fear of God. So now the Alter Rebbe says, however, this book is to everyone I know. So there's a tradition that the Alter Rebbe had Ruach HaKodesh, who was like a prophet. He knew every single person that would pick up the Tanya. He knew the soul of everyone who would pick up the Tanya. These are all the people of the Hasidim in that time, and that are beloved with each other. And I know what they're going through, and that's what I'm writing. These things are sayings of things which are relevant to every person that's going to read the Tanya. That I know is I know what they're thinking, and it's gathered from the different rabbis that taught me, and these are all answers to questions that people wrote. So essentially, the Tanya was built after the Alter Rebbe got tons of questions in service of God, and he answered them, and then he said, "Let me put a system down that will answer all questions." All questions that have to do with serving God. So that's what the Tanya is. The Tanya is basically a book to answer all questions to serving God. Now, if you say everything is about serving God, well then it's an answer to all questions possible about serving God. So then he says, I don't have time to answer every person, right? So therefore I'm going to put this book together, and if you can't understand how it answers your question, go bring it to a smart person in your town, a rabbi, and I beg that he doesn't have false humility. Some rabbis will say, I'm sorry, I can't understand it. No. Tell them they need to help you. Now, what happened was, and I'll just finish off, the Tanya came out as kuntresim. The Alter Rebbe would send out these booklets and they would copy hand to hand. Kuntris means a pamphlet. And they came out as books. And essentially what the Alter Rebbe was doing is he got many, many questions, and he had a very strong understanding of Jewish humanity. So he wrote little booklets that would go and people would study and answer all their questions. So what the Alter Rebbe did was he put them together in these kuntresim, and then he said after there were so many mistakes and everything like that, I decided to put them together in a book once and for all and have it printed. Originally the Alter Rebbe was hesitant to print it. He was always hesitant to print things, but eventually he allowed it because what happens is people are copying hand to hand, then they make mistakes, and then what happens is the mistakes can be misleading, and he said, it's time to print it and put together a full book. Now there's a whole story how the Alter Rebbe put which book the Alter Rebbe wanted to put first, and he actually switched order and everything like that, and that's all relevant aspects, but that's basically what we're trying to explain here. The Alter Rebbe is essentially going to try and explain how God is always relevant in every decision, and he's always relevant in our life, and everything in our life is about him. And it seems daunting for a regular human to take that on. So the Alter Rebbe is going to explain how it's not really so daunting. But he has a certain methodology of meditation which refocuses everything in life to understand that. We'll stop here. Now, it's interesting because the first many chapters of Tanya, we're